So in the last podcast, we examined how the where of method, of where we conduct our interviews, influences the sort of knowledge produced in the research encounter. This vital importance of the where of method is therefore key when we consider static interviews, but it's also a great utility when we do more mobile methodologies. And these innovations in mobile methods are what we're going to explore in this podcast. Here I want to talk about putting qualitative methods in practice on the move. Informed by the methodological dimension of the mobilities turn, which sees the whole world as constantly on the move, qualitative methods can also go mobile in order to gain a new understanding of the world. As Cohen-Smith put it, mobile methodologies seek to capture the ways in which being in motion produces different kinds of experiences of places and therefore different kinds of understanding about the world. Qualitative methods can go mobile, for example, if students take on the role of leaders of a guided walk, for example. However, it's also possible to use mobile methods to sensitise students to the lived experience of a city, the sounds, the smells, the tastes, and even the feel of the city. To this extent, therefore, these ideas synergise with a psychogeographical tradition. As David Pinder tells us, psychogeography involves an exploration of the physical and psychological landscape of the city. This perspective seeks to move students away from a perspective of space as a fixed geometric entity that we can access and get facts from, and towards a view of the world in which we are socially positioned within it, and we are transacted by all kinds of relations with multiple connections in spaces and different times. So in order to access these different relationships and different connections, we can go mobile with qualitative methods through the process of walking, for example. This is often termed drifting across the city. As Ian Sinclair emphatically puts it, walking is the best way to explore and exploit the city. Drifting purposefully is the recommended mode. So it's possible to harness not only the conditions, qualities and rhythms of the body in motion, but also the associations created by these individuals in a particular place, the where of the method, if you like, to excavate levels of meaning both the researcher and the research subject may theretofore have been unaware of. Rebecca Solnit details this point further. She states, "The rhythm of walking generates a rhythm of thinking, and through passage through a landscape, echoes or stimulates the passage of a series of thoughts. This creates an odd consonance between internal and external passage and suggests that the mind is also a landscape of sorts and walking is one way to traverse through our ideas. Thinking, therefore, is a form of travelling and vice versa." So as stated, these ideas resonate with the practice of psychogeography. The term psychogeography refers to spatial practices designed to confuse and reimagine everyday space. Inspired by rites and sites and organisations such as Mission Explore, a number of drifts can be suggested for perhaps your own engagement with the city. Some of these are specific urban explorations, for example the following. You could identify and explore the edges of places where you think one place becomes another. Where does place X begin and end? How do you know you've crossed into a different neighbourhood or a different place? Secondly, you might want to take a tour through your neighbourhood that you know well and pay attention to the street names you see. Why are the streets named how they are? What significance do they have for your understanding of the neighbourhood? What happens if you owned that place? How would you rename key streets so they have significance to your ideas of what's important? Based on these drifts or choices of your own, students can work in groups to conduct their exploration of the city. When students have done this, they might follow the following instructions. You might want to record your drift, taking audio recordings of your conversations as you walk along. Perhaps you might want to record the soundscape of the place you walk through, take pictures, make field diary notes. When you've finished your walk across the city, you might want to reflect on your experiences. You might want to undertake and record a focus group discussion amongst yourselves, which explores the thoughts provoked by your experience. You might use the pictures taken and other recordings as cues for discussion. What connections can you make to how you understand the city, to different geographical ideas or policy moves? So you might want to, when you write up your drift, to weave in a reflexive analysis and your own interpretations of your city. Make a logical and sequence argument evidenced by the resources that you've used, by your pictures, by your focus group transcripts, by your sounds, and by the ideas generated through discussion. So doing a drift across a city in this way positions the student critically in the qualitative tradition, interpreting and producing the world through their own study and their involvement with it. Some examples that I've done with my own students can be found on the Spatial Manifesto website. And here follows one example based on the student areas of Cathays and Roath in Cardiff, South Wales.
In this short video, we aim to introduce to you our version of Cardiff. When we were first set the task of capturing what student life in Cardiff is about, we began to discuss what we knew as students of the place and what was actually out there, and we realised that in reality we didn't see much at all.
This is when the idea of a student bubble formed. We identified that students live within constraints and as a result form geographical clusters, in the example of Cardiff looking at Cathays.
We will aim to show this through the use of qualitative methods such as one-to-one interviews, focus groups, images, videos and mapping software. By choosing qualitative methods, we were able to collect in-depth research into student life in Cardiff.
We decided that a good starting point to introduce you to our Cardiff would be our normal day. For example, our route to university.
As you can see on our journey to university, we are surrounded by students. As we can see, the advertisements and types of buildings are aimed towards students. For example, the many letting agents who are always advertising available student properties, the Woodville pub who promote deals for students, and the flyers promoting student nights out, cheap drinks and student-based events. If we look at the ideas of Friedrich Ratzel, which were developed from Darwinism, we can relate them to student life in Cardiff. He theorised that every living organism requires a territory and living space which provides them with all their necessities. This can be related to the student atmosphere we can see here in the video, filmed on our journey through to Cathays.
As previously mentioned, we decided to test our theory of the student bubble through interviews and focus groups.
In a way, by doing this, we are practicing ethnographic research. As for a year and a half, we've been living in the student environment at Cardiff.
As Herbert 2000 stated, this is useful because ethnography provides unreplicable insight into the processes and meanings that sustain and motivate social groups. So we chose to use the form of semi-structured interviews in order to achieve a conversation with a purpose, as described by Isles 1998. This prevented restricted answers and allowed us to gain a more personal insight into the interviewees' experiences in Cardiff. The following clip is an example of how we opened each of our interviews and focus groups to gain a basic understanding of our interviewee.
What university do you go to?
Cardiff University.
And what year are you in?
Year 2.
And where are you living this year?
Cathays.
Is that different from last year, like in terms of the place and who you're living with?
No, I've just moved down the road and I live with the same people.
We wanted to explore where the students' experience of Cardiff had changed over the years. If we look at this in terms of our student bubble theory, we wanted to see if their bubble had expanded or not. This question gave some interesting responses which allowed us to get closer to an answer.
Are you seeing more of Cardiff this year, so like the places that you go to and the opportunities that you get?
Yes, I'm probably seeing more this year because one of my housemates has brought their car this year, so we probably travel a little bit further.
No, I do the same thing as this year as I did last year. go to different places in town, but I wouldn't say I've seen more of Cardiff.
Yeah,
same.
So you see like the same as you did last year.
Yeah.
You haven't really branched
Just
out.
go there more.
You see a little bit more of Cathays
Yeah, I didn't really know
and like
Cathays that
different
well last
shops,
year.
but that's it. That's all I've seen differently.
I find we go to like lots of different local pubs
Yeah.
and like coffee places.
Costa.
Yeah.
I feel
But
like I haven't had the opportunity. I'm getting a bit jealous.
Although there were a variety of responses, with some second years thinking that they had seen more, most of the students believed that the only area they had seen more of was Cathays. This supports our theory that students do live in a bubble, as they have not ventured away from the central areas.
However, in order to answer this, we felt we needed a wider variety of interviewees, and as we are studying student life in Cardiff, it was important for us to recognise the experiences of other university students in the area. This meant interviewing students from both the University of Glamorgan and Cardiff Metropolitan.
Do you feel Cardiff is a very student city?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
And do you think this is because you're a student?
No, I think it's because there's a huge student population. Even if you go out during the like holidays or the summer or weekends, there's still lots of students about.
You're living with students and you're seeing them all the time?
Yeah, yeah, true, yeah. And you're always seeing students.
So here's a map. Highlight any of the places you've ever been.
Obviously, I've been to Cathays because that's where I live and that's where I go to uni. I've been to Butte Town to the Bay a few times for food, and I've been to the theatre. And I've been to St Fagans once to the museum, and I don't think I've been anywhere else.
I've been to Cathays because that's where I live. That's where the uni is.
Yeah.
I've been to Butte Town because that's where the bay is, and I like to do things there. It's nice.
Restaurants and things.
Yeah. And I've been to Heath to play football, but not this year. That was all last year.
You ventured that far into Cardiff. Really bad.
After collecting this research, we can see that there are many places in Cardiff that people hadn't seen. The majority of students interviewed had only mainly been to Cathays and Butte Town, and very few had ventured away from these areas, and if they had, it had only been on an occasional visit.
They were in fact surprised that Cardiff was this big, and that it included so many places that they hadn't been. We felt this solidified our initial theory that students in Cardiff live in a bubble that they may be unaware of.
If we were to research this further, we would interview other members of the public who live in Cardiff, for example shop owners and other residents. This would allow us to gain a wider perspective and research other people's views on student life in Cardiff. However, as a larger pool of participants would be required, it would be more effective to use a different method for such a large sample, such as a survey.
We could also carry this research out in other university cities in the UK, such as Bristol and Manchester. By doing this, we'd be able to see if a similar situation occurs.